Hi, my name is Enoch Leffingwell, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my testimony about how I've been able to come to the Lord and away from this life of darkness and into His marvelous light. And in my experience, see, I grew up in a Christian. I grew up in a home where we didn't really open the Bible, we didn't really study very much, and I would go to church reluctantly, mind you, and from age 11 to 16, I was severely depressed, and I was I was not happy at all, and I'd push away the people I wanted to bring closer. I had a hard time connecting with my family, with friends, and I was really depressed, and I developed this apathy in order to try to get through life of just like, I don't care. My childhood could be summed up in those three words: I don't care. And you can see that in here is a photo of my family where I grew up with my mom, a single parent mother, my older sister, and myself. And I was from age 12 was the height of my weight, and I ended up having a heart attack at age 12, where I was the second fattest kid of an elementary school of about 1,000 students. I was uh, when I had a heart attack, I was rushed to the doctors, and while I was in the hospital, they took my blood test and they found out what I found was very shocking. I was faced with a major decision at age 12, and from my blood test, we found out that I was borderline diabetic. I was high cholesterol. I already knew I was morbidly obese, and I was high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and I was faced with a decision. I didn't know much about diabetes at age 12, but I imagined that it was much like walking towards a precipice with one foot off. And I was about to take that final step, and my life may never be the same again. Now I've realized that type 2 diabetes can be reversed, but at the time, I was really I was really shocked about what do I do? What can I do to change? And what I had realized as I went to my mom, I was like, "Mom, what do I do? How do I help change this?" And she had taken these lessons on health from the CHIP program, which is a complete health improvement plan. And she was pulling books off this shelf, and she was sharing with me how the doctors are showing that a plant-based diet is one of the healthiest diets that can be had. And here I was stuck on this SAD diet, and SAD, and it stands for Standard American Diet, eating the burgers and the fries and the donuts and sodas and junk food and candies. I was just eating. I ate when I was bored. I ate when I was tired. I ate when I was sleepy. I ate when I walked by the fridge. I just ate whenever and whatever. And I started to put on the weight. And I remember people would look at me, and they'd see me like at a barbecue, for instance. I'd be coming back for seconds and thirds and fourths, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Enoch's a growing boy." And I was like, "Yeah, I am a grown boy." And then I grabbed some more and put it on my plate. But the reality was, I wasn't growing up, I was growing out. And until I had that heart attack, that fatal day, and near fatal experience. So my mom introduced me to these 8 laws of health, and it's this acronym called God's Plan, which God's plan starts with: G is godly trust, O is open air, D, daily exercise, S, sunshine, and P, proper rest, L, lots of water, A, always temperate, and N, nutrition. These were the laws of health. And I started to apply these 8 laws to my life. And the more that I applied these to my life, the healthier that I got. I was able to lose 50 pounds in 3 months. I've never put it back on again. Haven't touched soda since I was 12, and I don't miss it. Stopped eating donuts, and I started eating more whole foods, more wholesome foods, had more variety, and was able to have some delicious foods since then. And I was able to take off the weight, release those pounds, never to have it again. I started drinking more water, and water became my beverage of choice. And it's made a big difference, where a lot of times we think of disease, or we think of trials or these problems in our life as like they're the greatest enemy that we are to avoid at all costs. But in reality, disease or problems, trials can become our friends when we receive them as educators. In fact, Psalms 119 verse 71 says, "It is good for me that I have been afflicted." Why? That I might learn thy statutes. So it was actually disease that helped me to learn the statutes, the health laws, to be able to apply to my life. And truth be told, like, how many of us would have never known Jesus if it was not for afflictions that led us to the foot of the cross? And today I'm going to be sharing with you what were some of the afflictions, what were some of the hardships that I experienced that helped open my eyes to receive a radical transformation to never be the same again. And I believe that many of you who are watching today, you have real problems. You're going through real experiences that are challenging or struggles in your daily life, and you're wondering, where can I find something solid? Where can I find something stable that could help to bring some more light and hope and encouragement into my life? In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you some practical examples that you can learn from my experience and how you can apply it to find hope, healing, and happiness in your life as well. See, when I continued in this journey, I was fast forward to being 16 years old. I had started hanging out with the wrong crowd, and I was started going to college parties when I was in high school, and I was playing a lot of video games. And I used video games much like it was a way to cope with my depression. I used video games to kind of drown out the noise. And there was one day that I remember I was drunk and high at a party, and it was at the bottom of the barrel, the bottom of the bowl. And I was just like, man, this is the worst that I've ever been in my entire life. And then instantly I thought, well, when was I the happiest? And quickly I realized I was the happiest when I was on fire for Jesus. And I was like, this is so strange. You mean to tell me that I had the most joy, the most peace, the most happiness when I was on fire for Christ? Because I am the furthest thing from Jesus as the east is from the west at this point. That's what I felt like. And I just remember thinking that, well, I remember hearing that God is a God of love. And I figured, well, if God really is a God of love, then I imagine he must always want us to. I couldn't imagine a loving God creating his children to live in such a miserable existence as I have in these in my life up until this age. And I promised myself that I wouldn't live to be past 18, that I promised that I would take my life and commit suicide before I turned 18, because I couldn't imagine what life could be like, all the pain after like adulthood. And it's amazing that in America, the second leading cause of death among children under the age of 18 is suicide. And I was about to be another statistic if I did not encounter Christ in the manner that I'm about to share with you today. And so as I was thinking, like, well, when did I get on fire for Christ? And it was at a youth camp. It was a youth camp that I attended that I had. I'll never forget. There's an older gentleman. His name was Tim, and he would gather all the youth together. As you could see here, he's gathering the children together, and he would share with them, God has a plan for your life. And if you accept Jesus into your life and you allow him to lead your life, and you dedicate your life to his service, he's going to show you experience. He's going to show you a life that you cannot now imagine. And I just remember my soul was longing for something stable, something secure, something true, that everything I've done to this point just wasn't working. And I wanted that. And I remember I was talking to Tim, and he said a comment that was really eye-opening. Talked to him about some of the video games I was playing and how you'd be able to shoot people and kill them on some of these games. And just the look on his face was horror. And he's like, I couldn't imagine even killing someone on a screen would be horrifying. And I just thought to myself, like, is this guy really extreme, or am I desensitized? It's like, what kind of response is that? And it really got me thinking, because clearly you have this man who is beaming with the love of Jesus, and he is just like, he has a glow about him that he loves life, he loves people, and he's in alignment with his assignment. And it's very special when you get to see someone who's in that place. And I'm like, he has what I want. And I was praying to God, and I went upstairs. I was in my cabin. I've never like so wholeheartedly prayed to God up until this point as I did that night. And I just remember the burning question on my heart is that if I had that before, and then I lost that joy, that peace, that connection, then I figured the problem likely wasn't with God, it was probably with me. And I wanted to know, what did I do wrong, or where did I wanted to know, what must I do to have a relationship with you? That was the prayer on my heart. What must I do to have a relationship with you? And as you see on the screen, there's two questions that came to my mind. The two questions that God kind of implanted there were two answers. He said, you got to quit playing video games and you got to change your friends. And I was like, oh, it felt like God was asking me to walk up to a precipice and to lean on the edge and just like fall back off the cliff and trust that God's going to catch me. And it was terrifying because I couldn't imagine life without video games, because at the time, the video games was my only like semblance of happiness. It's what I used to drown out the world and to cope with the depression. And my family, I wasn't closer connected to my family. My sister, who I love the most in the world, she hated me because I was so selfish and rude and rebellious. I was disrespectful to my mom. She was having a hard time. My aunts was calling me like devil child and like pure evil, and people were just giving up on me. Mentors were giving up on me left and right, and they're just like, this kid is like so evil. What is wrong with this kid? And I didn't have much of a family ties, but my friends were like the closest thing that I had. And God's saying, your video games and your friends, I want those. And it was so scary for me, but I sat there and I thought, well, I looked at my past and I saw like what I'm currently doing is obviously not working for me. And I saw in my past darkness, confusion, disorder, and pain, so much misery. And I'm like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And eventually I got to a point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then I look into my future and I see lights. I see hope. I see possibilities with Christ. I see even potentially eternal life. And I'm like, okay, well, I have absolutely nothing to lose and I have everything to gain. So with that, I decided when I went home, I was going to quit playing video games. I'm going to change my friends. And for me, I didn't just tiptoe or dip my toe in the water. I cannonballed in. I didn't just walk to Jesus. I ran to Jesus with everything that I had, because if nothing changed, I was about to die. I knew I could not continue living the way that it was. And he was showing me that as I started to change my friends, he started to put into my life people who were wholesome, where instead of just having like, in the world, you may have lots of friends, but they're very surface. But in Christ, the quality and even the quantity of deep relationships and connections with people has been unlike anything that I've ever experienced in the world. And now I'm being surrounded by people who actually care about me, where I'm able to connect with people and we have common ground that is deeper than anything else that I've experienced. And one of the reasons why God says that is because I always like this analogy. When you see this photo of this fruit, what happens is when you have rotten results, or you have this rotten pear and see how it's touching the other pear, it starts to have a corrupting influence. Paul said in Corinthians, be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manners. In Proverbs, Solomon says that he that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools will be destroyed. So many times your friendships determine your future. When you change your friends, you change your future. When you upgrade your friends, you upgrade your future. And God was seeking to upgrade my life, my relationship with him. So I needed to seek out people who had the results that I was looking for, who were glowing with the love of God, who had a deep relationship with him, who had a sense of purpose and mission and fulfillment. They had what I wanted. So I started to seek after that. And when I came home, it was right after a Black Friday where I had spent thousands of dollars on some video games that were brand new. It's the best of the best, and used some Xbox 360 consoles and some other things. And God was like, at this youth camp, I want you to quit playing video games. And I went home. I'm like, wow, what do I do with all this equipment? And I decided to sell all the video games that I had. And in 3 days, I had $750 USD. And I dedicated that to the Lord. I said, I don't know what this is going to be for, but this is going to be for you, Lord. And I had a lot of time on my hands. I'm like, what am I going to do with all this time? Because I was spending like so many hours, maybe 8 hours during the summer, 10 hours during the summer playing video games. I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? So I decided, well, if I'm going to be a Christian, then might as well, if I want a relationship with God, then I guess it would make sense to pick up the Bible and start studying, right? So I started picking up my Bible, and I got a hold of these 28 study guides from Amazing Facts. And as I went through these, I had bought them on a Tuesday, and I had all 28 lessons finished by Thursday while attending school for 6 hours a day. I was so thirsty that I couldn't get enough of it. It's like the more that I learned, the better my life got. Because it was the more that I learned, the more I could apply to my life. And the more I applied to my life, I was finding answers in God's word that I didn't even know, to questions I didn't even know I had, but they were completely transforming my life. I came back changed, and God was transforming. He was changing my desires, my friends, my hobbies, my interests, my thoughts, my words, my speech. No longer was I cursing like a sailor. I was starting to bless people and be encouraging and strengthening and using calm words instead of all the profanity, and started shifting the media that I would watch. So stopped watching so much Hollywood videos and started watching more sermons or documentaries or spiritual videos that would educate and feed my soul, not just entertain my mind for a season. And then that pleasure, as like Moses said in Hebrews 11, that he was willing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Because let's face it, sin is pleasurable. It's enjoyable to sin, and there's an enjoyment in that. But the difference is that the pleasures of sin is temporary. It's only for a season, and it fades away. It's like drinking coffee. Sure, you get some excitement and awakeness, alertness, but they have side effects where you get the jitters, your heart's beating, it's hard for you to sleep, you're not able to dream, and that interference with your REM sleep now affects your memory. And where coffee, what happens after you're done with the coffee high? You have a coffee crash, and you end up worse than you were before, which only makes you start having withdrawals where now you need a higher dose, where you need to keep going back and have every day your morning cup of coffee. Because what happens if you don't have it? You're going to get headaches. You're going to be irritable. You're going to have challenges with sleeping, because the normal way that God designed us is now out of balance. It's in dis-ease. You're no longer in ease. So that's what happens with sin. It's enjoyable for a season. It's pleasurable temporarily, but then it fades away. And what I learned is that when you put your happiness in temporary things, your happiness will be temporary. But when you put your happiness in eternal things, then your happiness can be eternal. It's possible to have internal peace when there's external havoc. And Psalm 16:11 says, "Thou wilt show me the path of life. In thy presence is fullness of joy, and at thy right hand are pleasures forevermore." And that's something I realized that I was not expecting in deepening my relationship with Christ. In the world, the pleasures are for a season, but with Christ, the pleasures are forevermore, where literally each day can be better than the last, where the enjoyment, the peace, the fulfillment, the purpose, the passion, the drive, it could actually grow and increase over the years without the loss of enthusiasm. And it's amazing. When I found that fire and it was ignited within me, I had a desire to share it with everyone I possibly could. And I remember I was giving out books to anyone who would receive them. And there was a friend of mine whose foster mother has been a Christian for a very long time, and I was giving her this book. I was just so on fire for Christ. I'm like, I found Jesus, and he has been to me the chiefest among 10,000s. He has satisfied every longing of my soul, and I just want everyone to know. And she's like, "Aw, that's so cute. I remember when I was on fire for the Lord. That will soon run out." And I was like, "What? You mean to tell me that this joy, this peace, this fulfillment, like the thing that's brought me to the Lord, this peace that I desired so greatly to have, you're saying that that flame is going to be put out or be quenched or gonna die down, and then it's just gonna like go back to this aimless living while still like professing to be a follower of Christ, but I'm gonna lose that sense of joy and happiness?" And I was just like horrified by the thought that someone who's been a Christian for years is now telling me that this is gonna go away. I'm like, that would be like me losing part of the reason why I wanted that relationship with him. But I can stand and share with you 11 years later that that joy does not go out. It only gets stronger. It has for me. And I've not lost that first love. And it's still just as exciting to share with others. I have found that there's no greater joy than sharing with others what God has shared with me. And just being able to see people's lives transform because of your experience. To think that a problem that of your past, of an issue that you've had that God has helped you to overcome, now becomes your test, becomes your testimony. Your mess becomes your message, and to be able to share with others and inspire or encourage someone who is discouraged, who's going through a problem you used to have, and you can show them the solutions and bring them from the darkness you're so familiar with into a light to experience a new normal. To me, there's nothing greater than being able to share with people in that manner. So it hasn't gone out. But there's some well-intentioned, misinformed people who will tell you that that doesn't have to last, and it certainly won't get better. But I'm here to tell you otherwise. Contrary to popular belief, your experience with Christ when you come closer and closer to him can grow. And so as I was understanding and learning about the Bible, and I'm just finding all these amazing things, I was invited to a church that was doing a cooking class. And there at this cooking class, you could see me and my best friends, we had started attending this cooking class, and as we were there, I started learning more about health and reigniting some of the health principles I learned before, and how plants, that when we eat food that was made from the hand of God, it brings health and vitality to us. But when we eat more foods that are made by the hand of man, then this brings more sickness, death, and disease. Have you ever noticed that in the very center of the word death is the word eat? Have you ever noticed that what was it that brought sin into the world? It was eating of the forbidden fruit. It was food. What was it that the devil wanted to use to tempt Jesus in the wilderness, Matthew 4, when he was fasting for 40 days? It was food. Command that these stones be turned into bread. Matthew 4:4, Jesus said, man shouldn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God. And it was the temptation to eat on food. So we see that food down the line has been a temptation. Even Esau he exchanged his birthright, the blessings of his inheritance, for a pot of lentils. For something so simple as food to totally change the trajectory of his life, his children, his grandchildren, for generations to come, because of food. So food is part of the things that the enemy uses to bring death and destruction and sin and difficulty into our life. But God wants to restore our health. In fact, 3 John chapter 1 and verse 2 says, beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. And in this cooking class, I started to learn about God's original diet. I started to learn more about how our food is able to drastically improve our memory, our body function, our endurance, and a lot of things. And so by attending this cooking class for 7 days, every day that I attended, I brought my friends. I got put into a drawing where I was able to win this Natural Remedy Encyclopedia book. And in this Natural Remedy Encyclopedia book, it's an encyclopedia of all these diseases that could pop up, that whatever the disease, you go to the back, figure out the disease, it'll tell you the page you go to, and in that page it'll tell you the disease, its cause, prevention, and cure. And it gives some lessons of how you can overcome it. And it's compiled by multiple doctors that are coming together. And so I got this book and I'm like, this is a treasure chest. I started reading it. It was changing my life more and more. And I remember bringing it to school, and I was teaching others about health, and I became quickly known as the student with the health book. And people would come to me asking for health advice or health suggestions of what could be done. And I started to share with people and better understand what are the ways that people can overcome their health challenges. I still have high schoolers, students, classmates who remember me from high school that will call me every now and then or contact me on Facebook, and they'll say, hey, do you still have that book that you had in high school? I'm like, sure do. They're like, what does it say about this? And I could send them pictures and go send it to them. And it was an opening door to reach other people. And when I started learning about these health principles, I went straight home from the cooking class, and I was 16 years old, and with my mother's permission, we went through all of the cupboards and we eliminated everything that was junk food, unhealthy, that was not good, and we got it out of our environment. We either donated it or we trashed it. And we were just starting fresh, and we took some cookbooks. We saw what are the staple foods, or the foods ingredients that are most common in what are like 20% of the ingredients that will make 80% of the recipes. And we went out and bought a bunch of those. We replaced everything. And it's applying this principle in Romans 13:14 that says, put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ and make not provision for the. That's the same reason why I sold all the video games, because I didn't want the temptation to go back. A lot of times people will have a challenge with smoking cigarettes and they're like, okay, well, I want to quit smoking, but then let me buy this pack just in case. It's like having a plan B, or, well, just in case that I mess up, or like I want to quit, but like, let's say I failed, then I'm just going to tuck this away out of sight, out of mind, but I'll know where it is. That's making provisions to fulfill the lusts of the flesh. So we don't want to do that. So I eliminated everything that I could and replaced it with something better. Because one thing I love about God is that He doesn't just work on the plan of subtraction. He works on the plan of addition. He believes in something better. Whenever He takes something away, He always gives it with something so much better. And if this is a theme that you could see in my testimony, I want you to see that when God asks you for something, He has something better in store. So instead of video games, He was asking me He wanted my time. If I wanted a relationship with Him, friendship requires frequency. And I was unable to frequently communicate with God as long as video games were engrossing my mind and were spending my time. See, they became an idol in my life. And an idol is anything that we allow that we put before God, that becomes an idol. And for me, some of you listening is like, well, I'm glad you were delivered from video games, or that's not my problem. And that's fine, because the devil has a flavor for you. For you, it might not be video games or your friends. For you, it might be food, or it might be alcohol, or it might be unprofitable television or movies or YouTube videos, or maybe it is the wrong social circle, or maybe there's some conflict in your faith with your job that you see that by continuing in this direction is not leading in a way that glorifies God. Then each one of us, I believe God has created all of us with a God-shaped hole in our heart that only God's love is able to fill. And as long as we don't have God's love filling the void in our heart, we will seek to fill that void with everything that we possibly can, whether it's video games, foods, or it's work. Sometimes it could be sports, or whatever it is. We try to fill this God-shaped hole in our heart. It's like you have a square peg and you're trying to put a triangle in there and it just doesn't fit. So only God's love can fill that void, the longingness that you may be feeling if you're listening to this. I want to share with you that to let God in. When you let God in, He can fill. He created you. He knows what you need. He understands you. He loves you. And He is ready to enter when you receive Him and when you accept Him into your life. You too can have a plan. God has a plan for your life, and you can understand that plan. You can understand your mission, your assignment. You can understand, why are you here? Where do you fit in this grand scope of world? And where do you find this purpose and all this confusion? You can find that when you let God fill the void, so that you no longer have to be stuffing your heart with things that will never satisfy. So it's always this plan of something better. I remember I was scrolling through Facebook one day and I saw this meme. It was this photo, so powerful, where it shows Jesus. He has his hands behind his back, and he's reaching out and he's talking to this little girl, and this little girl is holding on to this teddy bear, and she's like, "No, not the teddy bear. I don't want to let go. It's like, I don't want you to take this from me." And she was thinking that in this teddy bear, that she has this little teddy bear. She's like, "I don't want to let go." And Jesus is clearly like, "Give me your teddy bear." And behind his back is a massive teddy bear. It is so huge. And you could see that she doesn't see it, but he's saying, "Give me your teddy bear." And he's going to replace it with something so much better. And I believe many of you, and myself included, are holding on to small teddy bears and to these little bears, when we can have a big bear, a big blessing from the Lord. And when we learn to let go and let God and trust Him, He will take us on a journey. He will show us things that we've never yet experienced. And it will be so much better. And if you could see the end from the beginning, you could look back in your past, you could see that you wouldn't want it any other way. But I've found that trusting God was one of the hardest decisions of my life, but it was one of the best decisions in my life that I never regretted. And so as I'm learning these health principles, and I'm letting go of more things, God is replacing it with so much better. We're not really making a real sacrifice, because all of these things that we're sacrificing the lesser so we can have the greater. And the greatest enemy of best is good. Sometimes they may be good things in our life that aren't inherently bad of their own, but God is asking for those. And if God is asking for something good, it's because He's going to give you something so much better. And His ways are much higher than our ways. His thoughts are much higher than our thoughts. As the heavens are from the earth, that's how much better. The pleasures forevermore, where each day could get better than the last. And as I was learning about these health principles, my life was changing. It was improving. And I immediately started to teach. I delayed not, made haste to keep Thy commandments. I started to teach with other people. Why? Because I quickly learned that the best way to learn is to teach. The best way to learn is to teach. And when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. And so I went to school and I started to teach cooking classes. And as I was teaching cooking classes, I'd invite the community and involve some of the church members and help them to put together healthful food. I started selling cookbooks to some of my classmates in high school, and we would come together and we'd have these potlucks where we go make some healthful food at home. We'd come together at potluck, and then we would all do like a Bible reading, or we would read this book. Because what happened was, I got a hold of this book called Natural Sunday Law, and it was by Jan Markinson. It was so powerful. It's free online. You could find it. But there I started to learn about prophecy. I started learning about the last day events foretold in the Bible. And I've started learning how there's been history was really just prophecy foretold, is prophecy fulfilled, and how every major world event has been predicted in prophecy with exact accuracy. I'm like, this is incredible. If God could so accurately predict historical events in advance, then I could trust Him to predict my future personally, or the future of the worlds, and align myself on His side of this great battle for souls. Because it's really is a battle for your focus, a battle. There's two sides that are warring for your time, your attention, your affection, your love, your resources. They want you. Satan wants you lost, and Jesus wants you saved and redeemed eternally to experience a relationship with him starting today and beyond. And as I was beginning to share with people, I found this book called National Sunday Law, and I started studying these prophecies. I'm like, this is incredible. Immediately, I called up my best friend. I'm like, Josh, you got to check this out. You got to come over here. And he came over, and I didn't know how to give a Bible study. This is literally the 6th book I've ever read in my entire life, was a National Sunday Law book. I didn't know how to give a Bible study, so I just read the book again out loud to him. It took us like 3.5 hours. And because we were talking, discussing, and doing some things too. But it's a short book, 70 pages. And I went through, and he was like, this is amazing. And he wanted to go to church with me the next week. And then as soon as he left, I called up my other best friend, Danielle. I was like, Danielle, you would never guess what just happened to me at youth camp. She's like, what has gotten into you? It's like, I found Jesus. And I started sharing with her the events leading up to it, my conversation, what must I do to have a relationship with you, and how much joy and peace and strength that I found. And she's like, I want what you have. How can I have that? And she's like, and I asked her, have you ever given your heart to Christ before? She's like, never. In fact, I've been an atheist. I've been very rude to the Jehovah's Witness when they knock on my door, not interested in any, I've just been disrespectful to anyone who talks about God. And I was actually angry with God. But seeing what God has done with you, I want what you have. Said, great, meet me in the library tomorrow morning at school, and we can pray and give your heart to Christ. So she did that. And as I was going to school, I would go anywhere and everywhere, and I would hacky sack. And hacky sack's like a little sandbag that you're able to kick with your feet around in a circle with friends. And I remember I was hacky sacking with people, and I would just say, hey, does anyone like to read? And if someone liked to read, I'm like, hey, I got this amazing book. Would you like to read it together? And I would just bring them over. I only had one copy. And this one copy I studied with like 20 people. And anyone who would listen, I would go together at book reading club and have a healthful potluck, and where everyone brought a dish. And then eventually I got to page 70 and I realized, wait a second, you mean I could buy 1,000 copies of this book for 50 cents each? And I have like $750 sitting in my bank account. I'm like, let me do that. So I wrote a check for $500 with a letter saying what I've done with this one copy to the author. And I bought 1,000 books, and he sent me 1,200 books. I had stacks of books that were taller than me, and I'm 6'2". I'm a tall man, but this I had so many boxes of books. Each box is 100. And then next week, he sent me another box of 100. And then the following week, another box of 100. So total, I bought 1,000. He sent me like 1,500 books. And I was saying, now there's a work for me to do. So very quickly, I rallied up my friends that were going to this book reading club, and we gathered together. And here's a map of my house where I grew up and the high school where I went to school. And everyone within a mile radius of my house got these National Sunday Law books, and mobilized my friends for service who were knocking on doors. I've knocked on thousands of doors and got out all those books. And we were able to reach people and speak to others, and the experiences to be able to, that I've enjoyed in serving with others, serving people, has been life-changing. And I share this with you because making the decision to dedicate my life to Christ's service was the best decision I've ever made in my life. Not even just choosing to give my heart to Christ, but choosing to dedicate my life to his service. That is an active, ongoing, daily decision. My life of my time, my health, my knowledge, my relationships, my influence, using my talents for Christ's service has been the best decision of my life. And I want to encourage everyone to do that. It doesn't mean you have to quit your job and go like be a monk or in a monastery and study and pray all day. That means that you can glorify God, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, doing all to the glory of God. Because I've never regretted deciding to follow God in an area that he has led. He's never led me in a way that I have regretted in the past. And since then, I chose to get into full-time ministry, and when I was 17 I started traveling the world, and started traveling and speaking. I spoke on all of the states on the west coast of America, and I started traveling east to west coast, and eventually internationally, being able to speak, give Bible studies, do evangelistic series, sharing, and creating a YouTube channel where I was recording videos every week, at least once a week since 2012, and creating content like these videos, and speaking on other people's platforms to share with people about health transformations, about how they can find their talents, how they can use their talents where they are, to understand God's plans and purposes for their lives. That has been so rewarding in being able to start missionary training schools, to train up missionary speakers and leaders to be able to go forth and to bless others. And currently, I started a health food store, and in this online health food store, I'm put in contact with people every day who are having health challenges, to help them to be able to lose weight, to be able to get clarity in their mind, sleep better, to get out of pain. And as I'm coming in contact with people, it is so rich and rewarding to be able to help people with these physical problems, and that leads to opening opportunities to share with them spiritual solutions, heavenly solutions to earthly problems. And as a missionary in the marketplace, there's daily opportunities to pray with people, to speak to others, and impact people for eternity. But this has been this journey. This has been my journey from stressed and depressed to overwhelmed and blessed, to just overwhelmed with God's joy and peace and strength. And I believe that it's possible for you as well. And if it's your desire to come closer, to, if you see that God's working on your heart, if there's something that you've been seeking to fill a void that you realize only God's love can fill, then I invite you to accept Christ's hands. Give him your small teddy bear, because he has something so much bigger, so much better than you can now imagine. And I invite you to allow him to come in, because Jesus is knocking on the door of your heart. And when you open, he will come in. He promises to sup with you, to eat with you, to spend time with you, because there's no greater joy than being in alignment with your assignments. So this has been my testimony, and I pray that it has been encouragement and a strengthening to you as you've been listening. And I appreciate the time for you to listen here. Thank you for giving your ear, and I look forward to connecting with you as well on social media. If you want to follow me or connect, just Enoch Leffingwell on. You can Google me and find me on. I'm anywhere: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. But thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future.